Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello, and welcome to the Prose and Cons podcast by Precipice Fiction, where sometimes we feel like prose and sometimes we feel like cons. Today, I'll be hosting. I'm James Healy, and we will be discussing The Last of Us TV series and a comparison with the video game. Joining me for this conversation today is Burnham.
Hello.
Matan, Elul.
Hey.
Phoenix, Raig.
It's true, I'm here. Hello.
Paddy, Boylan.
Hello.
And Alex.
Hi.
Okay, and I wanted to start by asking, what's everyone's awareness, what's everyone's acquaintance with The Last of Us going into it? Who had played the game or who was coming to it completely fresh?
Hi. Look, it's impossible to not have heard about it at all because the game received such raving reviews. So no, I didn't play it, but I was definitely aware of its existence. Like, if you showed me a picture of Joel and Ellie, I would have told you, oh yeah, the two from The Last of Us. Haven't played it. I vaguely knew it's about zombies. I didn't know it's about mushroom zombies, and I was positively surprised. But that's about it. I just knew it exists. I knew it got like a 10 from IGN. And the second one was also received good reviews, right? But was a bit more divisive among the fans, I think. Don't ask me why. But yeah, that's about it.
I had heard about it years and years ago, in the same way as Matan. It's something that I'd always meant to play, especially since I started writing horror. Does anyone have a time on when it actually was, like 2010 or something? I'm terrible with dates. Like when the original game first.
I think it was right when the PS3 was finished and the PS4 was coming out.
Okay, cool.
I think that was my time frame for it, because I think it was everyone made a big deal about how it was like shutting the door on the PS3. It was like, that's the best thing PS3 has done.
They made a remaster as well on PS4, so I don't know. Anyway, so I'd heard about it. It was something I'd always meant to play, but had just never got around to it. And then funnily enough, a couple of months ago, I actually bought a physical copy and I was like, this is $10. This is a great game. I always wanted to play that. And for some reason, never put it in, because I'd always looked at it and was like, this looks traumatic. I'll do this later. I didn't have any familiarity with it. But since we started to do this, I've gone through and played almost up to where it is in the show. And boy, howdy. It's a ride.
And then Ali, you're also playing it at the moment, is that right?
Yes, so I played it on PS3 eons ago, so whenever it was. I remember being at film school when I was playing it, so it would have been around, I think I was late to coming to it, but I would have been playing it around that 2019. No, I don't know. I was in film school and I barely remember it. I remember the big key things, so I kind of know where the narrative is going, and I remember being the gameplay being challenging, and those were kind of my big takeaways of it in my memory. So coming back, and because we're doing this podcast and because the show was coming out, I'm like, cool, I'll grab the PS4 remastered, playing that. I'm not quite where the show's up to, so I would be about where episode 4 is in the narrative, with the gameplay, not episode 5. And yes, I'm having a wonderful time of remembering, because like Matan, I'm Xbox native, I'm not PlayStation native. So a lot of I'm just remembering all the controls again and trying to get my fingers, every time I try to melee something, I'm pressing X instead of square, and I'm trying to think in shapes instead of letters. But I'm getting there. It's slowly coming back a bit more intuitive, and I'm not yelling at all the zombies that are eating me. But yes, no, really, really enjoying it. And the story's slowly coming back to me as I'm playing the game. I'm like, I don't remember this room. And then after a while, as I'm kiting around the bloater, I'm like, actually, I do have a vague memory of this. It's coming back.
I haven't played the games, but like everybody else who's ever been served of a Kotaku Facebook post, I've definitely heard of them. I know that they're done by the people that did Uncharted, which is Naughty Dog.
And there's a lot of similarities, I think. Big adventure stories that are really narrative focused and really cinematic, and that it's got zombies. That's the extent of it. I'll play it one day when it ever comes to PC, which I hear it is soon, actually.
Oh,
Yeah, I think like
Yep.
March. I think this
Ooh.
next
so
month. I think,
famously a
something.
PlayStation exclusive for so long. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Might play it. I don't know. But after I played the game, I mean, after I've seen the show, I'll kind of know the narrative anyway. So,
Mhm.
don't know. That's me.
True. So I went in, like, when it came out, I was already a Naughty Dog fan. Like, I played the Uncharted series, and I've always loved how much their games felt like movies. Like, my reaction was always like I wanted to, like, going through Uncharted, I had the same instinct as though I'd watched a good movie, and I'd be like, oh, like, to a friend, like, I want to show you this movie. But then I remembered it was not a movie. It was like 12 hours of gameplay, and I'm like, I can't just show you that. Dang it. But then I didn't play The Last of Us until my friend had it, and he wanted me to play it because he knew I'd like it. So I was like really tired one time, and he was like, play this. And I was like, okay. And I got really tired and was playing it, and it was hard. But I, again, just loved what Naughty Dog does with how they make it feel like a movie, and script and dialogue between characters and stuff. Always cool. Yeah, I didn't get very far, and then watched the show, and then started watching gameplay on YouTube because I also don't have access to a PlayStation or anything. That's it. But it's great.
It's interesting that a few of us have started to play the game, only got so far, and then stopped. I don't know what that's about.
I didn't own it. I literally only played it at my friend's house that one time, and I was like, I'm sure I'd play this a lot if I had it, but didn't make space for it at the time, I guess.
It is hard too. It's a tough game.
Yeah.
I was the same in that I played the game and I loved it so much that I became really obsessed with how they'd made it and how they put it together, and the actors that they'd involved, and the creative team, and how they'd rendered it and stuff. They had the actors come in with the costumes on and get all the facial reactions and stuff. So I was really interested in that. Because of that reason, and because the storyline was so strong, I always knew that if they made it into a film or they made it into a TV series, it'd probably be like an instant hit, because it was so character driven. So once I heard that they were finally picking it up and putting it into a series, I was like, yeah, that's gonna absolutely knock it out of the park. So it brings us on to the next thing, which is the obvious. What's everyone's first impressions? How did everyone find it? The show?
It's pretty fucking good. It's really, really good. It's amazing. It's amazing. People talk about the curse of video game adaptations. Like, we can all think of really, really average video game adaptations in film. Mostly film,
which
actually.
Average is a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though I kind of liked the Doom movie. I thought it was pretty cool, but it was dumb. This is amazing. This is so good.
Look, I didn't play the game, so I don't know if I have the right to say it, but my first reaction watching it was like relief. And I don't know how to explain it, because I've been like, you mentioned Uncharted. Okay, that's an example of something that's been turned into a movie to mixed success.
Huh.
Yeah, Uncharted, Tom Holland, look it up.
Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland.
Mark Wahlberg doesn't even have a mustache. Like, look, my traumatizing moment was Assassin's Creed, the movie, and that's all I'm gonna say. Like, I'm gonna stay away from that conversation. I'm in a good mood today, but just relief. I'm like, okay, they didn't botch it up. It looks, and I didn't play the game, but still, like you said, video game curse. I just expected the worst, and it is so good.
So who's here seen Chernobyl?
Yeah.
Miniseries.
Absolutely
So
loved it.
same
Craig
guy.
Mason, right?
Sorry?
Who is Chernobyl?
Oh,
What is
it's a
Chernobyl?
HBO miniseries based on the event in Chernobyl in Russia when
Ukraine.
they had the
Oh,
Ukraine. Sorry, that's an
Chernobyl,
important
yeah.
distinction. Ukraine.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The nuclear plant disaster. So it's go and watch it, Matan. Holy hell! It's one of the most terrifying, tense
It's
miniseries I've seen. The episode with the dogs still haunts me. But yeah, so it's just a masterclass in tension and being unnerved, and that's bleeding across into this, which is more character driven, which I think is great. So if you could accuse Chernobyl of missing anything, it was maybe character. Like, there were great characters, but you weren't in it for a clear character-driven story. You're in The Last of Us for a character-driven story. So that paired with this amazing tension is just, it's working so well. It's amazing.
Yeah, I was going through it and playing the game and being like, this would be hard to sort of port over to a movie thing. But like, I mean, I don't know if we're going to get into specifics yet, but from the very beginning, because you can get through the, like, I just blazed through the first little bit of the game fairly quickly, like the first introduction, and like, it's extended a little bit, but it really does hit the same beats. It just sort of lingers on certain things, but it does this really nice thing where it will do these shot for shot sort of things, which are these clear homages to it. Like the first one I remember seeing was like right at the beginning where they're in the truck and he's like, where do we go? And it's like 17, 17. And it's the same shot and you can physically see it. And because I just played it, I was like, they did the same thing. Like, so... And then, like, later, but then some things will be, like, made a bit bigger, like having a plane crash behind. Like, anyway, so they just take what's good about it and sort of just extend and, like, blow up the good bits about it, I think. That's my takeaway from it so far.
Yeah, to talk about the shot-for-shot stuff.
Yeah, you'd probably have more info on this.
Well, I just really loved... So I watched episode 1 before going back and playing it again and refreshing my memory. And I remember at the time, so episode 1 and when the daughter heard death, and there's a very excellent shot where it's like a close mid shot on the daughter and Joel. And then, so he's panicking, he's saying, no, don't do that. And then the camera pans away to the brother and him. So it's like a wider shot. And then it pans back and she's passed away in the time the camera's panned back. And at the time I'm like, oh, that's a slick camera move. Like that's good direction, good cinematography. Then I go back and play the game and I'm like, oh shit, that was actually a directorial choice in game. The camera cinematography team made that decision first. The show has made a homage to that. So at the time, I remember thinking slick camera stuff. And then I'm like, oh, that's original creative craft that the filmmakers have borrowed because it was already perfect and so well done. And they did another cut of it as well. It's a comedy beat later when Joel and Ellie are in the car and she's like, I'm not tired. And then it's a hard cut.
The smash cut, yeah.
And
I remember that.
I played that in game first, then show. So I got the reverse experience over these past week. And I'm like, oh, that's, again, it's shot for shot and done really well. And what I think the show's achieving is when it is doing the very clear homages, it's not hammy. Like I think we're used to, even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, really hammy, overt, wink, wink, nudge, nudge fan service. So whenever they do reference something we should know, it's like, even if you don't know the reference, you're like, oh, that felt like a reference, right? You're like, they're doing something there where they think they're really clever, even if I don't have the context. The Last of Us is happy to do a reference and just move on. And if you're a game player, you see it, you get it, you love it, but it doesn't make a song and dance about it that if you're not aware of it, you don't realize you've missed a reference, if that makes sense. It's such a subtle thing. There's two moments I can think of that illustrate what I'm talking about. The very last episode 5, when we get big mushroom, big guy. And what he's famous for in the games is he's very grabby. He's very grapply. If you get inside his zone, he will grab you. And the death scene is he gets his hands in your mouth and rips your head apart. And this, if you're playing the game and you need to get past, like, I think I had to run it 3 times before I got past him the first time. So I saw that animation a few times.
It's very visceral.
And then you're in the watching the show, and he gets grabby. He grabs someone, and he does this. It's a wide shot, so you're from a distance. If you're just a show watcher, you're going to be like, "Oh, gnarly death." But if you're a game player, you'll be like, "Oh, I physically felt that because I've had my head ripped off that same way many, many times." And I had a moment where Ellie, in that same scene where the zombos are under the car reaching for Sam and Henry, and Ellie shivs one of the clickers in the neck. I think
it's a direct pull from the game for sure.
As a show watcher, you're like, oh, go Ellie. I think as a game watcher, you're like, good. Shiv is the only way to do it. That was a clean shiv,
Yeah.
Ellie. Well done.
That was a good shiv.
In my head, I was like, "Oh, great! She's unlocked that. She can just do that."
Yeah,
every
she's
time.
got the
She'll
shiv
be
now.
fine.
Yeah.
How many she got?
I'm like, that was a neat shiv. I'm pretty sure Bradley, myself, and Nate all went shiv when that happened, which is a very, I think, only gamer reaction to that moment.
That's funny.
Okay, I gotta ask, just in terms of action. So the shows obviously got some action, but I'm guessing the game has more. What
yeah.
kind of head count are we talking about up to this
Oh,
part of the story? Like how many
mass murder.
zombies? Like are we talking like what? Like John Wick levels of
Also, the video game kind of works in that you're not great with firearms,
No.
and it's very costly to waste. It's very costly to use bullets at all. You will typically finish people or zombies off in close combat with a stick or a brick, or you're just your bare hands. So actually fighting is quite costly. So you spend a lot of the game actually trying to avoid other people and trying to avoid zombies. There are certain points where you are forced to engage, or certain points where you will slip up and have to like kill 3 or 4 people with a bottle. But it's quite visceral.
It gets
it's really,
scrappy.
really brutal. Yeah, it's really scrappy. So like I kind of feel like they couldn't do that in the TV series without almost alienating the audience from the Joel character and making him look like a psycho.
It's a masterclass in stakes transliteration. So in the game can have many, many different encounters with, all right, you've walked into a new area, here we go again. But what the game does really well is like resources are slightly different, and the enemies you're coming across in this encounter have slightly different senses, and there's a slightly different number of them, and the environment's different. So constantly by toggling these 3 different things that can change, the stakes are changing, and as a player, each encounter you go into, you have to approach it slightly differently, and you have to think about it differently. You're like, I've only got 3 bullets, but I have 3 shivs and I have a brick, so it's already going to feel like a different encounter to the last room because you have different resources. And that's how the game constantly keeps you on edge as a player. Like, yeah, it's always new because you have a different set of those 3 things to play with. I think the show, has been really strategic in that we haven't had that many zombo scenes. Because once you have one zombo encounter on screen, it's going to look really similar to another zombo encounter on screen, because you can't quite communicate that as a player, you're going through the resource management in your head. And that's a really key part of the stakes that a show watcher just doesn't have. So I appreciate how few zombie encounters there have been to date in the show, because they've got to be really precise and clever about when they're going to bring out a zombo and use it in just the right way, rather than the game is encounter. Maybe it's a people encounter, maybe it's a zombo encounter, but they've slowed it down. They've made it more about people, and that's, I think, been really clever adaptation.
Like what you're saying about resource management and the like scarcity element, that was actually one thing that I didn't like about the last episode. Which the last episode was the most like lukewarm for me in terms of all of them, but I've loved it up until this point. But before I get into that, I just wanted to say other creative recognition. Ellie, like you said, you recognized this like, oh, amazing cinematography, and then you realized, oh, that was the game's doing, like that was their creative work. Is the opening song, the like opening credit music.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, this
So
is
good.
a great opening credit sequence, and like the music's amazing. And then I'm watching someone on YouTube play the game, and that music cuts in. I'm like, no way! Like Naughty Dog did that? That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's from the
Yeah.
game.
I thought it's just HBO magic.
No, it's Naughty Dog magic, or whoever Naughty Dog hired.
The HBO show has a bunch of people from Naughty Dog. In fact, the main writer of The Last of Us is Neil Druckmann. Neil Druckmann is also the co-writer, along with Craig Mazin of The Last of Us. So when there are those scenes that are so similar and pieces of dialogue that are more or less word for word the same, it's because they got the same writer on board.
Amazing.
And I guess he knows his material is good, so why change it?
Mm-hmm.
And the composer, Gustavo Santaolalla was the composer, and he did all the music for the game, which is all that lovely guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah, really empty, void, like feeling it guitar.
It's so great seeing them like pay homage to the game instead of trying to make it its own thing, because Halo came out recently. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but yeah, I don't want to. It got so panned, and it seems like one of the biggest complaints. I mean, Halo is not cinematic, so I don't think it would lend itself anyway, so it's a bit of a weird choice. But it seems like the creators have almost taken Halo as just the bare minimum starting point and then kind of made their own thing. And what's the point? What's the point if you're going to do an adaptation?
What's the point of ruining an IP like that?
Yeah, this seems like it's a real love letter to the source material, right?
Yeah.
They really want to do it justice.
Going back to the mechanics of the like zombies not appearing very often in the show, I like the fact that in the 5th episode, Henry, like, he's like, oh, you guys are the people to take us across the border, and Ellie's like, yeah, we killed 2 clickers, and he's like, see you did. And I like that there was that little, because they've only showed it to you a little bit, they make a big deal, like, these enemies are really hard, like even those little things, like it just like throws it back to the like it just, like you said, it's this constant love letter, this constant reaffirming of like, we are taking directly from this and making it like as close as it can be in a cinematic version to what we've seen, which is really nice.
And that's so like in terms of building resource tension, as well as like understanding the difficulty of these enemies, and that it's not just like, oh yeah, you have a gun, you're good. Like, you need to like be aware of your surroundings, and it's really dangerous out there. But like, one thing I love in the game that's kind of passively translated to the player is that when you first pick up a gun, you realize you only have 4 bullets, and immediately you have this feeling of like, ooh, I can do very little with that. And it's like just that little note of like, hey, like, feel that, like, things are going to happen, and your gun's not your way out.
Yeah. Your controls don't lend yourself to like firing either. I think if you're moving or if you're moving your aim, you're like the little crosshair, which is like, that's where your bullet's going to go, it just expands. So you're just like, okay, I can probably not hit anything.
Yeah.
So you're not relying on shooting your way out of a situation.
It's worth drawing attention to that, because I think that's what made it, I think plenty of games had done that, but at the time it got really big for doing that, because it was like, no, this is a stealth game. You can't shoot your way out of every situation. You'll be punished for this, as a counter narrative to all the shooters out there. And I played a lot of Destiny, and that's a game that rewards, your quick fire, and your shooting can be as fast as you can do it. It wants to reward, if you can get faster and faster and better at this in your fingers and your reaction times faster, the game will keep up with you. The Last of Us is the difference is it's actively difficult to swap weapons. It's actively difficult to swap, like get into your bag and reload and heal yourself. Like, everything is slow on purpose. Everything is difficult on purpose, and that it makes it exciting and rewarding when you get through the room. But it's a game that makes you work for it.
Yeah.
Do you guys know the term Ludo narrative? Ludo, Ludo narrative. It's the way the game plays and the game's mechanics, how that informs the narrative of the story. So The Last of Us isn't an action film / game. It's, I mean, in genre terms, it's resource management and resource management horror. But the fact that they only give you so many bullets and you need to stealth, and that your crosshair becomes like this giant circle when you move, all plays into that tension. The mechanics of the game make you feel like you can't directly confront them. You're just a single individual in a world that's much bigger and scarier than you. If they'd given you a machine gun and perfect accuracy, it would lower the stakes, and it would make your character seem invincible, and it would mean that the tension just evaporates.
I think I had this conversation with Alex maybe 100 times about how I think that one of the most important elements of horror is the balance between, let's call it the aggressor and the victim. The stronger the victim is, the more imposing the threat has to be. For example, if your victim is a 12-year-old cripple girl, like in The Conjuring, Annabelle creation, then almost everything you do is scary, because she can't get up the stairs, she can't get down the stairs, you need someone to push her on the wheelchair. But if your main guy is Joel, you need you need a big fucking zombie, you know, to make me feel, or a lot of them, because it was kind of established that one-on-one Joel can kind of take them. And again, I'm talking about the show, not the game. So when I saw this big zombie guy today and he's basically immune to bullets, I'm like, man, I hope this guy is not coming back next episode because I don't know what he's gonna do.
Yeah. No, it's like me and my girlfriend have started watching. Is anyone familiar with Old Enough? The little Japanese school kids, like
Yes.
Believe me, I'm bringing this back. But the point is, it's really cute and adorable. But the way the producers create stakes is that it brings it down into the world of this child. So suddenly, literally walking like 500 meters over there to get something and bring it back becomes this big adventure because you are so invested in the stakes of this small child. Like I was watching this episode the other day, and they're little 15-minute episodes, but there's this kid and he's like bringing a bucket of fish like to like get chopped into sushi, and the bucket breaks. And it's already been established that this kid's afraid of touching the fish. So it's this big thing. It spends like 5 minutes him just trying to put the fish back in. And then the bucket breaks again. And you're like, oh no. And it's just, I don't know if I'd say it's tense, but it's definitely like heart wrenching. So taking it back to that, it's the sense of like making your stakes fit your protagonist. Like you said, Matan, if the, like, you know, Joel just popping off, like just clearing a path for Ellie with the sniper rifle there, you're like, okay, this guy knows what's going on. But yeah, like as soon as all those zombies start like running out, you're just like, well, there's probably only so much you can do from up there. And then it's just the kids by themselves, more or less, and Henry. So yeah, it's about constantly modulating those stakes based on who it's directed at, I suppose.
And that it was in that flood scene at the end of episode 5 that actually broke my suspension of belief a little bit. And that was the one thing that I had an issue with, was they were doing such a good job of like that clicker fight. Like when you're doing that in the game, there are like more than 2 and you can kill all of them or something. But in that, it was like there are 2 of them and you lose. The payoff is the price to get past them is that you lose tests. Like they paid to get through there and it was not easy, and it was like you were holding on and it was really tough, and like all the way through that. And then like I love like Henry's reaction to that was incredible. It's like, yeah, the characters we're following are badasses, they got past 2 clickers, that's incredible. And then this flood of hundreds of them come out, and it for Joel to be able to snipe a path for Ellie through that, I was a little bit like, like a horde of like just animalistic chaos. Yeah, to be able to, it was too much for me.
He did go from not being able to hit the truck to being able to like ping headshots. from like I can't hit the truck to like, oh, I can just sweep path through.
It started to veer into action movie a little bit for me at that moment, whereas before it was so scrappy, and then suddenly I don't know. Yeah, I totally agree, Phoenix. That was like, oh, okay.
I did like that scene, to be honest. It was like, yeah, I think that one part with him just clearing the path there was a lot. But I don't know, I like that it was referenced, like, and there was the like, you know, what's her name? Kathleen was like, yeah, it's fine. We'll deal with this like exploding massive shit later. And then like it was a little Deus Ex, but like, okay, no, I'm cool with that. But
just the Henry and Sam thing. Can we talk about this? Is this like, because this is one of these moments when I was really happy that I didn't play the game, because what in the actual, like how quickly it happened. I expected this drawn out scene when they're crying about it and I can't do it and I have to do it, and maybe they lock him, and I thought they're just going to kick him off. Like when he stopped Joel by shooting at his feet, like I thought, okay, they're just going to put him in a closet and they're going to debate about it. But then he just headshots his little brother so quickly. And I'm like, wait, I'm not ready. What?
It was so well done.
The suicide didn't surprise me as much as just how quickly he just kills his younger brother, and that's just just a gut punch. Like, how did all of you guys know it's coming?
I saw a spoiler. Unfortunately, I was looking at game footage, and that's exactly where I stopped. So I knew that was going to happen, and it's almost like blow for blow the same in the game as the TV show. That's one of the scenes was almost exactly the same, and really impactful in both. Yeah, that hurt. That hurt.
And just a small shout out that they actually shot ASL correctly. I've got a little bit of a vested interest in this about when
ASL? Sorry, what is ASL?
American Sign Language. So any sign language featured in film, it's, you know, that the cinema language needs to be cut around the, you know, the full sentences, the full dialogue performed in ASL, and they need to be mid shots so you can actually see the ASL. I had quite a problem with it was the Hawkeye TV show that featured ASL, but the cinema language didn't match the ASL in that they were all, it was normal cinema language in that, you know, if two characters are talking to each other and one can keep talking and you cut to the other character and like the cameras will cut between one line of dialogue. You can't do that with ASL. You got to stay on the one person who is speaking in ASL. The Hawkeye didn't do that, and it was also framed in close-ups and stuff, so you weren't getting the, like, if you're trying to read it in ASL, you won't be able to read what was happening, and therefore it's not actually, it feels more like performative inclusivity rather than actually showcasing the language. While I was interested every time it's featured. I'm like, are they actually going to adjust cinema language, the cinematography, to feature this correctly? And they did. So it was worth a shout out that it's all wide shots, it's all two shots, and they will never actually cut on the line of dialogue, so you're not cutting it. So yes, no, just a shout out that they did that correctly, and I was very relieved and very happy.
Just another shout out to the show. One advantage that video games have over, or that a video game would have over a TV show, is that you tend to forgive kind of almost not quite bad storytelling, but there's certain things that you can have happen in a video game. Like in the video game, Henry and Sam just show up with absolutely no forewarning, or like they're not foreshadowed in any way. They just show up and then they're part of the team. So a TV series obviously had to kind of establish them as characters before they showed up, so that when they show up, it's like, oh, these are those two characters. Whereas if they just popped up out of nowhere, it would have seemed kind of unbelievable, or a little bit out of nowhere. And the other thing that a video game, particularly the Last of Us, did was that you spent an awful lot of just gameplay time, which is almost like downtime with the characters, where they're kind of just sharing general dialogue. And this is kind of slowly building up character relationships and establishing how the characters get along. So I was really impressed how they were able to develop Ellie's and Sam's relationship in a short space of time on screen. Whereas that's something that builds up over the course of maybe a couple of hours, or an hour or two at least, in the video game, where, because Sam could speak in the game, he wasn't deaf. He was able to be kind of like have childlike wonder, and Ellie was able to share in that childlike wonder with him, because neither of them had seen the city before, and she was a little bit older, so she was kind of like taking care of him. So that relationship kind of builds over time and is really sweet. So I was delighted that they were able to establish that same thing. They took the downtime to just have them kind of chill out and share comic books and stuff to establish that relationship. So they just another shout out to the great writing of the show, that they're able to adapt those things.
Off of like introducing characters, because in the game, it's like you're playing as Joel, so you can't really jump around to other people, other scenes, and get story happening around the characters because you're staying with the same person. Like on off of what you said, having like introducing the characters and their story before they come in, so you kind of have their significance before they're introduced to Ellie and Joel in the show. I had a question because I didn't get through to this part in the game. For episode 3, I already forget their names.
Bill,
were they in the game? Yeah, Bill and Frank, were they in the game?
Sort of.
Sort of.
It's different. It is different.
Yeah, let's do the episode 3.
It was just building the sense of building significance. I thought it was really cleverly done, because in a game where it's like, we got to get to point X because we got to get a truck, it's like your payoff is the truck because you've worked to get there. Whereas in a show, if it's like they're walking around and suddenly they get to a gate and they're like, oh, my friends aren't here, but cool, here's a truck. It'd feel very cheap and very coincidental. But the fact that they build an entire narrative and you get so connected to these people, they did this really cool thing where they indirectly give significance to the truck. Whereas if we just followed Ellie and Joel, it's like sweet, a truck. But because we took that detour of character building, it felt so earned, even though they didn't do anything for that truck. And I thought that was really cool.
And they did the same thing with Sam and Henry. So I think they know that that's a very excellent tool, that they need to break POV to give us backstory, to give us the reason to care, precisely because of what you're saying, Phoenix, because the investment needs to be earned a different way, because this is fundamentally a different medium.
Well, what's lovely is they're not introducing extraneous characters for the show that didn't ever exist in the game. They seem to always start with this baseline of, here's something in the game, how can we massage it and make it into a more TV show friendly narrative thing, instead of just like, let's just bring in some more characters. There's I was reading about Neil Druckmann, the main writer, and there's an interview where he says that his writing philosophy in games, and I guess now in TV shows, is simple story, complex characters. He always tries to make the story as simple as possible while making the characters as rich as possible, which I think you can kind of see in The Last of Us. Fundamentally, it's pretty simple. They got to get the battery. They got to get the truck. They got to find his brother. There's a lot of little details in there, but the details really come from the human complexity and the people. So I guess that economy of, let's just try and use what's in the game. Let's do as much as we can with that without introducing all this extraneous, I want to call it bullshit, but extraneous stuff. It makes the show feel really, really lean and not overly encumbered with all these like side plots and side characters and little unnecessary details.
I think that's a really, really good philosophy. Like, I almost want to write that on my wall. Like,
it's good, isn't it? Yeah.
Make the plot. What is it? Keep the story
simple, complex characters.
Yeah. Well, like, that's the perfect illustration of that, I think, is the way that Bill and Frank are represented in the two mediums, because it is really different. Not just in terms of, for anyone who hasn't played the game, I'll give you a little overview. They're almost like, Liz was, she had this idea yesterday. She's like, in the game, it's more of a cautionary tale. So we get this little inkling that Bill is, he mentions, you never want to get trapped with someone because you'll only let them down, or something like that, or like they'll drag you down or something like that. And basically, he finds Frank's body. The guy's hung himself. Which is pretty bleak.
What?
But it gets worse.
Hold on, what?
Yeah.
Let's
What do you mean? There's no romantic.
Wait, hold on.
Whoa, hang on.
Let Alex finish. Let Alex finish.
So
sorry.
Yeah. So that happens, and Bill's already said like, hey, look, you don't want to get wrapped up with anyone else. It'll only hold you back. But then the worst thing is, after they find the body, like, they're going and fixing up the car. Ellie and Bill are fixing it up. And you go around the corner, and you can miss this really easily, but you find a note from Frank where he's like, fuck you, I hate your guts. This was better than living with you. And you're like, wow. Like, it is polar opposite from what's in the show, which is this, like, well, I'll let someone else talk about what happens in the show, but it's...
Wait, Alex, did you like the change or not? That's what I want to hear from you.
I do. I think the third episode is probably the strongest, personally. I actually really like me and James just like it really dark and nasty. So I do like what was done there, but ultimately I think the show took zombie movies and stories have a tendency to be very nihilistic. So if you can inject a little bit of positivity and a little bit of like, hey, maybe this world isn't completely bleak and barren. It is mostly that, but I think it was a strong directorial choice, but I did really like the idea of Frank just being like, hey, Joe.
And building on what you're saying, Alex, I think it is a fun slight twist on the genre in general that they chose to do something more, quotation marks, optimistic. But also we have, I think, a similar distaste for queer narratives being nihilistic as well. So I think we're at the right time in the adaptation, a decade or so later, where there was the opportunity to be like, if we're going to upend expectations on the apocalypse narrative with a little bit of optimism, we can also upend expectations on the queer narrative with a little bit of optimism. So it was just the collision of those two things. Probably that was the creative discussion that led to the dramatic change in episode 3, and I think for the better.
I agree. Ultimately, I think. Yeah.
I cried.
It was so wholesome, I didn't want it to end. I just want to keep watching these two, have their little fights and paint the wall together, grow their strawberries. All right, there are zombies outside.
And I think
In
that
the
it was a fresh take on the zombie narrative. You're like, what does it look like when you manage to isolate and carve out a life for yourself? I don't think I've seen that before to that degree in a zombie narrative, because it is so much about the I don't know, misery porn of it all. This did feel like a breath of fresh air.
That was like a COVID
Who
metaphor.
kind of like closes themselves off and is the survivor, and we've seen that character like done so many times. It was nice to see it kind of taken in the complete other direction. And thematically, I think it works quite well. With the video game, narratively, I did like how Bill kind of ended up being like an unreliable mentor, and that he's consistently kind of pointing Joel away from like, don't be taking care of other people. Don't you make yourself
get rid of the kid, get rid of the kid.
Yeah, get rid of the kid, get rid of the kid, get rid of the kid. But him doing this, because him and Ellie really don't get along in the game, and Joel almost steps in as he kind of replaces Tess then as being like the go-between like Tess was the go-between between Joel and Ellie. Joel then has to step in and defend Ellie a little bit, and kind of he starts to warm to her in the game at that point. And then when you find out the backstory of Bill, you're like, that's why you're this way, because all this happened. So like, take it with a big pinch of salt now, the way that you've been staking that. So I like how they changed the narrative, but then also had Bill's letter to make him a bit more of a straightforward mentor, give him that good advice.
There is a great moment from the game that I missed in the show. So I think you're absolutely right. It's such a good development for Joel that he unwittingly steps up to protect Ellie from Bill, even though that was not his position to start with. And it's when she's in the car and she has to get it running off the clutch start. And he gives her like a little bit of a pep talk where he's just kind of goes over.
You're doing really good,
You're doing really good. And it's just
a little shoulder pop.
It's the smallest moment, but I'm playing it along and I'm like, that was so cute. Oh my God.
So speaking of the relationship between Ellie and Joel, I noticed watching the game that they develop a bond really quickly. Like, Ellie comes out swinging the knife and Joel has maybe his gun on her for a second, but that dissolves pretty quickly, and pretty quickly they're together. In the show, it takes multiple episodes. Yeah. And in that scene where they first meet, Ellie has his knife at him for quite a while, and he has her gun trained on her the whole time. He does not trust her. It works really well in the show. Yes. And I guess in a game, you can't have too many cutscenes. I'm guessing everyone knows what a cutscene is in their listening, but a cutscene is a moment in the game where all the action stops and the player's just watching a little cinematic rather than being like directly in charge of the action. They're going to move that stuff along pretty quickly. Whereas in a TV show, you can really, I guess, take your time to flesh things out and develop relationships. That relationship being drawn out for longer really, really worked. Like they really earn their good rapport, I think, in the TV show.
Well, what I would say with the game is that, and the benefit that they had was they have these long stretches of gameplay where there is dialogue happening. So for a big stretch, I don't know how long you spend where it's like the trio of Tess, Joel, and Ellie.
In the city?
In the city, yeah.
Yeah, that felt like a video game moment.
Well, no, during that section of the game, Joel does not speak to Ellie at all. I'm pretty sure Ellie is trying to make conversation and Joel is not responsive, and he only maybe grunts. So Tess kind of has to step in and keep the conversation going. People who've played the game recently, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah,
I honestly just watched it and I can't remember.
Because those silences and those grunts are kind of all the more loaded because you've spent a bit of time playing as Joel with Tess, as Joel is making his way around the quarantine. And Joel isn't chatty, but he's communicative. But then during that section with Tess and Ellie, he's dead silent. And you're playing as him in that silence, and you start to feel the weight of it. Like he's actively trying to not interact, and he's actively ignoring Ellie as she's trying to make conversations. So that's like their starting point. It's like dead silence. And then when they lose Tess, he has that scene where he's like, what I say goes. So it's very standoffish. And she's like, great, now I've lost Tess. Because she had a relationship had grown between the two of them. And now she's obviously like, great, I've lost Tess. And now I'm stuck with Joel. So it's kind of over that next section with Bill that he starts to warm to her a little bit. So I do feel like the relationship because of the gameplay, they are able to take it a lot slower. Obviously, with a TV series, you have to go from scene to scene. There has to be interaction. The video game gets to have these long sections of those silences, which I thought worked really well for watching the relationship slowly develop.
And there's small things of cooperation in the gameplay in that. So there's a lot of boosting, and planks need to be laid on a lot of things to cross a lot of obstacles and stuff.
A lot of planks.
And ladders.
Boxes with wheels, which you never see in real life.
Yeah, you need
to.
But there's this sense of, so Joel can only get over some obstacles because of Ellie. And so this is a really cool mechanic that you're like, I won't be able to climb this unless I boost Ellie up, or Ellie can't swim is a really important part of the game. So Joel will have to swim somewhere, find some flotsam for her to jump onto and swim her over there. Then she can climb up and help you up. So there's this intrinsic cooperation built into it that you become to rely on Ellie and care about this NPC because you need the NPC to get over the obstacles. And kind of the back and forth dialogue is the first time Joel has to boost Ellie up, he's all grumbly about it. And he's like, you're going to fuck it up. You're going to be shit. And I don't really want to boost Ellie up. But then like after the third or fourth time, Joel's like, up you go, kid.
That's in the compound, isn't it? Like it's when he gets into like that first time where he's like, no, I don't know if you should climb over that. And she's like, no, come on, this is fine. Like you were doing this with Tess. I can do it. Like, and she actually makes a big deal about like, no, I'm here. I can do this. And he's like,
yes. So they are capturing that. And I appreciate that they've done that. And it is a homage to this fact that you become, like, tool's the wrong word, but if you are just looking at it as raw gameplay mechanics, Ellie becomes a useful tool. I think BioShock with Elizabeth does this a little bit as well. She's a really great also like NPC you're babysitting and carrying along, and she throws you ammo and shit, and you really come to appreciate that. You're in the middle of a firefight and Elizabeth's like, heads up, more ammo, and you're like, you're the best, Elizabeth.
I distinctly remember that. Yeah, that is something that games do or can do quite well, is that you connect with characters based on going through the struggle of the gameplay as them or with them, and how they make your life easier. I felt like that worked really well to make you connect with the daughter at the opening of the game, which I feel like them adding in the extra maybe 20 minutes of her getting the watch at the beginning of the show
very good
worked so well
so
to get you there to the same place. I really like that.
I just wanted to ask, I feel like when we did House of the Dragon, Fire and Blood, it was me and Ali who were being asked that question. Now it's all of you guys. People who play the game, how did you feel about the casting when it was reported? And do you feel differently after watching? Did your opinion change? Did your opinion remain the same? What do you think? Did you know the actors before? I'm assuming you knew Pedro Pascal, but
Pedro's a powerhouse. It's the year of Pedro, isn't it? Like
I know Pedro.
He's so good.
No, he's excellent, and he does so much with so little. There's so many moments where he'll just have a reaction to something, and I'm laughing at the television. Like, it's so funny. Like the most recent episode where he's on the ground and he's got the gun pointed at him, and Ellie's like, that he just has an asshole face. Don't worry. And he's like offended that it's such a small moment, but he's like, oh, he's like hurt that she says that. And it's small acting moments where I'm like, that's just a masterclass of whatever you're doing, Pedro. Keep doing it. You're brilliant. I forget Bella Ramsey. Bella Ramsey's doing good. She's doing great.
She's great. I think she's fantastic.
Yeah, I think she'll really grow into it. In by the end of the season, I think that arc for Ellie's going to be great, and we'll get to see Bella Ramsey cracking it by the end. I
think I actually prefer her portrayal of it than now Elliot Page's portrayal.
No, it was Ashley Johnson.
Was it?
Yeah, they just made her look like they made.
Yeah, wasn't there a bit of a controversy where Elliot Page was like, "Didn't you steal my face, but didn't cast me?"
Yeah. Really?
Wait, they just use Elliot.
They just made the character look like.
Really? It was like a thing.
They really
did.
But it's literally they're an actor. Why not? Okay, I'm done.
Which was particularly unusual because she had actually done a video game around the same time, so it wasn't like.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Oh my god! What was the name of that one? It was like a David Cage game. It was weird and not as great.
It was super weird. like a spiritual.
But they came out at the same time.
Projection. Yeah, it came out.
So Alex, you prefer Bella Ramsey over?
Yeah. So look, I liked the portrayal of the original actor, but I did feel, and the beats are there and stuff, and they mostly keep them, but I didn't feel as much of the like annoying teenager, like maybe a little on the spectrum that I did from Bella Ramsey, which I really like, because she's just like, I'm just a kid, like I'm literally a 14-year-old. I'm kind of annoying. Like there's something about her portrayal that's just a bit goofy and a bit like, oh yeah, we're going on an adventure, where like the original actor is sort of like, oh, I'm just, I'm shy and scared, just a little bit, like I think I prefer Bella Ramsey's portrayal, even though a lot of those moments are lifted like word for word, shot for shot, beat for beat. I think I prefer Bella Ramsey's interpretation of it.
I like them both, but they're just, to me, they feel like completely different characters. And I think in the show, that one's Bella, right? Bella Ramsey.
Yeah.
The show. I feel like she does a great job of capturing someone who was born in this time, where it's like she doesn't look like a teenager that we know. Like she fully feels like a different creature to me. This is her normal. And so she's like excited to be outside, and just like when she's cornered, she looks like an animal. And it's like, yeah, that's how you like make sense to me. It tracks. And I just think that didn't come across in the Ellie in the game to me. She feels a little bit, or quite a bit more docile to me, and a bit like scrappy, sure, but not like, I don't get that feral sense from her, and I really like that in the Ellie from the show.
She seemed more familiar in the game, like a normal teenager.
Yeah, and she's not as familiar with world context. Like she's like the aeroplane and the car and new experiences to TV Ellie, which game Ellie is like, I've driven a car before. Get away from me, Joel. So it's fun that's a TV show thing that they're doing. I also want to draw attention to the fact that the wider cast, a fun thing is being done where comedy actors are being cast for these dramatic roles. And so they're playing against type, and they're playing against what like an audience would expect them to appear as. And it's a very fun, unsettling choice when directors choose to do this, because it's instantly kind of unnerving if you see a familiar face that you're used to seeing in comedy do something really dark, or just the fact that they're playing against type feels odd and unsettling, even if we can't articulate as an audience why it feels unsettling.
Well, like, I guess you could almost imagine, like, this is what this person would be like if they grew up in a world that was falling apart full of fungus zombies. It's like, this is the dark alternate to their normal comedic personality, right? We're seeing someone that we know is like, haha, but they're...
I just imagined Seth Rogen as Hamlet, just following that...
Well, famously Robin Williams. I forget the name of what's
the
it
ultimate
called?
sad clown.
Yes, 1 Hour Photo. Like it just whenever he was cast to do really, and some of Jim Carrey's serious roles are very unsettling and very unnerving, because it's suddenly against type, and you're like, why does this feel intrinsically wrong? So both Bill Frank and then the woman playing, she was the really psycho lady leading the band of rebels,
actress, but I don't remember her name.
Yeah, so it's obviously an intentional choice that they're going out and getting comedy actors for these roles, and I'm like, that's really clever and really subtle.
Yeah, her performance was chilling, like chilling,
unnerving.
It's like what
Umbridge.
Liz got so many great lines about it. She was like, she's got evil kindergarten teacher energy, and I thought that summed it up so perfectly.
Wait, who are we talking about? Which character?
Kathleen, the leader of the resistance.
Oh yeah, she's a bitch.
Yeah,
no, she is.
No, she is totally.
She tells them they're gonna get a fair trial, and then it's like open season on their ass. That's not right.
Yeah, they do humanize her a little bit, but I think actually the way they did it was very clever. They're like, because she openly admits, like, no, I was told to sort of forgive this guy, but no, I can't. Where's the justice? Where's the justice? And it's like, okay, well, I understand where you're coming from at least. Like, justice versus mercy. It's a classic paradigm.
I just wanted to pose one quick question to the group. So like, I feel like we have acknowledged like all the ways a story changes when moving from one medium to another, and we've kind of been comparing it. And I love thinking about it as like putting gas or liquid in a different container. Like it's still the one story, but it's going to change shape and form how you tell it. But I got into an argument with someone the other day about, he was basically saying if the game exists in that format, why bother translating it to another medium? He's like, if it's there, why even do it? So yeah, Matan's doing this with his fingers. So I said, because not everyone plays games. And he's like, that's a marketing answer. And I went away and thought about that because I got shut down at the time. But I reflected on it and I'm like, I don't think it's truly a marketing answer. I think that there's also an accessibility reason as to why we change story into different formats. Like we're not having this argument about ebooks versus audiobooks, even though we both acknowledge that those are fundamentally two different experiences engaging with the same story. If you have a terrible audiobook reader, you're going to have a bad experience and not like that text. Or if you have a really good audiobook reader, you might have a different connection and relationship with that text than people who have just read the book. Like I know Brandon Sanderson's fandom, like they always talk about the two readers and how they pronounce things. And they're like, that's how I'm going to pronounce things. I don't care how it's actually pronounced, because the audiobook, like it just becomes a part of how you consume the media. So I wanted to throw that question out to you guys.
Well, that's actually, I was just going to give a simple answer of like, just from our artistic point of view, I think it's a fun challenge. And especially as like, I love thinking of, this is going to sound weird saying it like this, but it's because this isn't how I thought of it for the first, like when I was a kid and stuff. I didn't think about the director of movies much. And then only later in my life did I start recognizing just the artistry of a director and like how incredibly impressive it is. So I can just imagine being a director and like playing a game, recognizing an amazing world, recognizing like a cool story, and just being like, I want to have a crack at that one. I have some things I want to do with that, and just wanting to translate it into your medium, I think it's really cool and fun.
I think the idea of translating something to a medium is, it's like, if you can do the same job, like as good and different or better, I think that's a great reason to do it. It's I don't know, I feel like, was that Bradley, Ali, who said it was a marketing choice?
This was an argument with Bradley, correct?
Okay. Oh wow. Okay, yeah, okay. Anyway, that sounded like a Bradley thing to me. It's one of Ali's housemates. But I think that's a little cynical, because to me this is, and of course, it's a subjective interpretation. To me, I think this is taking all the good bits of the game and sort of excising all the bits that aren't as good, because it's like, okay, well, look, we've already got this really strong character arc, character story, or multiple arcs. How can we then flesh these out further, like and subvert them? And the Bill and Frank thing is the perfect example of that, of going like, taking the beats, and this is the clearest example of like taking the beats and sometimes taking the actual source material and going like, how can we improve this? How can we update this for a literally a new decade? And how can we make this literally more accessible in terms of, is it ALS or no, ASL? ASL. So ALS is a degenerative disease. It's a very different thing. And incorporating a lot of these elements and just making it more like, hey, we can, we can do this, and we can have this be appropriated for a new generation, essentially.
I heard that there were post-episode interviews that were held with the creators around this show, and they said that if they couldn't do an idea or a scene from the game as good or better, they wouldn't do it. So anything they leave on the ground is something that they've deliberately thought, we actually can't do justice to this, we can't do it as strongly, let's leave it. So, I mean, it's probably not a coincidence that there are so many moments from the game that they could do the same or better. A, they've got the same people, and B, the game is incredibly cinematic. But not everything could have worked like this. I mean, it's a great adaptation, but the source material is perfect. I mean, Tomb Raider, Halo, Doom, like, they're not good adaptations because, like, the source material it's not a movie. It's not cinematic. In fact, one of the criticisms of people who didn't like the games Last of Us had, hang on, I've got two quotes here. Someone said that it felt too much like an interactive movie. and they wanted more agency. They didn't want to be watching this character development slowly happen. Fair enough if you're playing a game. And another one was that someone said it felt like the game equivalent of Oscar bait. Yeah.
Wow. That's a nice one.
It did.
Yeah.
So that's
But
people
it
being
also-
annoyed it's too character driven.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I get that from a game. But I think, I mean, there's so many games that wouldn't have worked as a great adaptation. And this partly is working because the source material is kind of perfect for it.
I think there is a strong like artistic instinct to not just do it in a different medium, but also develop the story in different ways. Like with the series, they're able to expand on characters and expand on the world in ways that they weren't able to in the game, because you're playing solely as kind of Joel and in that kind of almost nearsighted way of experiencing the world.
Do you ever play as Ellie, or you only ever play as Joel?
Oh, I won't.
Okay.
I'll answer that question.
Okay, yep, fair.
Right. Yeah, so you are just playing kind of in that nearsighted way of experiencing the world, only where you can go and where you can reach. The scene where you're being chased through the city by like the Resistance. The Resistance is just this, I think they're just this faceless enemy that just keeps coming after you. And that works really well because you're experiencing them as Joel experiences them, which is just strangers who are trying to kill you. But in a series, it works that they've given them motivations and they've made an antagonist within the group. So that all works really well. As well as that with an adaptation, like I'm sure we've all thought about this, like what would our story look like if it was a TV series or if it was a film? And Ali, you've gone between the two to do books and screenplays and stuff. So I think that that's a strong artistic reason to adapt something into a series as well.
I gotta say, I really like this question, and I'm a bit conflicted. On the one hand, I'm gonna start with a positive. I'm really happy this adaptation happened, because that's a story I wasn't exposed to. I wouldn't be exposed to otherwise. I'm like Ali mentioned, I'm an Xbox kid. I have been for a while, so I just wouldn't know this particular story. But I'm also a little cynical because I do feel, especially with this flood of Disney remakes, where they just remake those classics, and some of them just feel soulless, like they were made for money and nothing else. So, you know what? I feel like as a whole, the idea of translating media is about money. And let's not lie to ourselves. The movie industry, the game industry, it's a business, and that's fine. It's not a bad thing that it's a business. But still, if you put it in the right hands and you put it in the hands of people who love the source material and respect it, especially in this case when, according to Paddy, it's the same writer as the game writer, correct? So you can find someone who loves their child more than their original parent, and that's what's happening here, I guess. So, okay, it is a business thing, it is a capitalist thing, all right, but if the people in charge love the thing, it can turn out all right, and that's okay. It's okay if they make a buck.
To add on to that point, I completely agree with you that it's a business thing, but it's a business thing that requires artists and requires like good artists that like are in it for a good reason. And there obviously is artists who are out there for the money and are doing it to make a book, and they probably have good craft. But if they're doing it for the money, they probably don't have like the passion and the love and like the real investment in what it is. And I know that a team who sat down and made like a video game that opened with just two characters sitting on a couch, like interacting, like that's so character driven, and it just set up the story to be like a completely different experience. So as long as there continues to be artists with like a passion for what they're doing and a kind of an integrity to kind of stay true to the art form, we'll hopefully still have some good films and some good storylines coming out amidst this horrible capitalist Disney soulless takeover. So something might survive, something might glimmer through.
I just off of the in the hands of artists and stuff and people that care about it, I did just want to shout out to the actors and actresses, because I feel they did an amazing. I'm so impressed with the acting in this thing. Like Joel's daughter in the beginning, after she was shot, I thought like that was incredible to me, and I felt the pain and just like all of it. In the breathing, I was like, holy cow, that was intense. And just I love who they cast as Tess. I love Tess's character in the show. I love that actress as Tess so much.
She was really good.
Yeah. I believe they did that death scene, in one take because they didn't know how much she was going to give to it. So it's quite a lot of raw reaction. I believe.
Wow.
I might not be entirely
Which
sure.
works for the Steadicam sort of nature of it, which is how they do it in the game as well. You were saying, Ali, that's got that cutaway and then the cut back, which is just, it's so intimate and just like, oh my God, this is just all happening right now.
I know that they took loads of takes, like almost a day. I think they had to come back and redo it in the game, because they weren't getting it. I know the actor was saying that he was really giving a lot to it and he was really struggling. But the director pulled him aside and was like, take a lot of the performance out of it and just hit the beats. And so he kind of actually gave a he dialed it down to like 20%, and that was the one that they used. That was one that they used in the game, which actually it works really well.
Shout out to Troy Baker, because I'm a really big fan of his work. So he's in voiceover industry. Great. You've all heard Troy Baker's voice, even if you don't think you have. I
have them here. He's done Uncharted, BioShock, Batman, Arkham Knight, and God of War. So
yeah. And I personally love the Telltale Borderlands game, and he's Reese in that. So I adore his work in that. So for Troy to be really honest about, what an intense scene that was for him to perform and get right. That's an actor who's at the top of their craft, working to aim to get that scene as good as possible. And I think the video game actors laid the groundwork and set a bar for the live action actors to meet. So Troy walked so Pedro could run in that scene. Just fantastic stuff.
Because I quite like leak depressing things, I personally prefer Joel from the video game. I prefer Troy Baker's Joel because he seems
less humor,
almost less there's a scene where Ellie tells a joke in the series and kind of Pedro's character kind of laughs away and he's like, that's so stupid, but he can't help himself from laugh at it, and it's a wonderful scene. I do like Pedro's portrayal of Joel, but Joel in the video game couldn't have done that. He just didn't have that in him anymore. And there's a bunch of scenes that are just close-ups of Joel's face in the video game, and you can just see how weathered he is and how not necessarily shell-shocked, but he's just weary and he's just tired. And I really, really like that vibe.
I think it's interesting because it's almost the decades that has passed, and it's a bit of a critique on that stoic masculinity. So Joel's from a time where he is that very stoic masculine. That's how he's dealing with his pain. And then Pedro is giving us a version of the character who's giving us a little bit more vulnerability. And I think we're going to be fucking wrecked as an audience as a result of this creative choice.
Don't spoil me.
Oh, because of the happy ending, Matan, obviously.
Happy ending, all right?
Yeah.
Ice cream.
Am I ready for this? Is there a red? Okay, don't spoil me.
Really
I want you to answer, but I don't want you to answer.
Don't ask questions.
If there was a red wedding-esque moment, would you guys?
We're not
Would you tell me?
this, Matan.
I can't even see
We're
your.
not doing this.
No, never mind. Nothing.
We're not doing this. I off of what Ali said, I also just appreciate the vulnerability. I really like the dimension it adds when Ellie first shoots someone and then she says Joel's you shouldn't have to do that or whatever, and then she turns it back around on him and was does it get easier when you get older? And he's just no, but I'm just sorry. It's not that he's immune, it's not that he's anything, but he just and it's kind of just, I'm just sorry for the world. I'm just sorry. And I don't have an answer to this, and it hurts me too. I'm just sorry. It felt so gray and beautiful.
I do feel there was a lot of fragility to Joel in the video game. I just think that he was really trying to mask it. I know the scene where Tess kind of tells him, you have to take Ellie, after him having spent the last hour ignoring her. You really see the panic in his face where he's no, I don't want to do that. I just feel his response to that fear and his response to that vulnerability was to really put up a wall. So I kind of maybe read that a little bit differently from everybody else. But I do like how in the series, he does have a bit more humor and a bit more kind of obvious humanity.
I gotta ask, I don't know how much longer we're gonna run. I can always sort of move this back if we need to. But what do we think of what we've played and seen? do we prefer the TV show ultimately, or do we think we're going to go for the game? And I know, look, neither is, well, I haven't finished the game, and the TV series isn't finished either. But how are we tracking? I'm going to say personally, I think I'm leaning towards the TV show. It just feels like a Shoulders of Giants moment.
I'll just jump in and say TV show for no other reason than I experience a lot of frustration when I can't make it through an encounter. I can only play video games for small hour bursts at a time. I don't know if you've picked up from my personality, but once my frustration boils over into anger, I've got to turn it off and walk away because I'm no longer having a good time, and neither are the people in my vicinity.
I hope you don't play Dark Souls, Ali.
I was just thinking that.
No, I've played Dark Souls in tandem. Fuck. I think Teenage Ali may have broken an Xbox controller once. We won't judge her. She was young and full of hormones. But yeah, no, I will vote TV show for the simple reason that it doesn't elicit a violent reaction from me, but I get all the good, safe emotions of anger and tension without, hurting anything.
I'm conflicted. I'll probably lean video game just because the video game is a lot more bleak and tragic, but I'm also going to wait and see. I'm going to wait. At the moment, I'd be leaning video game, but I'll wait and see where the series goes, because I have a feeling there's going to be like some big performances later on, so I'm looking forward to that.
I'm going to vote TV show because I'm an Xbox guy and I'm bitter that I'll never get to play it.
I'm going to say show just because I'm finding that I already like some of the choices they've made in terms of changes they've made to the plot of the game, like some subtle changes, like the fact that they're going for a battery as opposed to a bunch of guns as they are in the game, just feels like intrinsically more interesting to me, like more humanitarian, I guess, as opposed to like, we need guns, we're selling guns. It just little things like that. I just like it more. I find it more interesting.
Has everybody answered that question?
I haven't played the game, so.
Okay. Okay, then. So we normally like to cap things off with a quote. Phoenix, I believe you have a quote for us today.
It's true, I do. You always look ahead to what you'll do next. So that quote was Annie Wershing, and that's actually the actress who played Tess in the video game, and she actually recently passed away. So thank you, Annie, to your amazing work that you did in bringing that character to life initially, and thanks for the quote as well.
Thanks very much, listeners. This has been the Pros and Cons podcast by Precipice Fiction. See you next week.
Bye.
So long.
Bye, guys.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.